Testing. Testing. All right, guys. We're about to get started. So, do you want to make yourself a seat somewhere, and we'll jump straight into this. And we'll probably have a really good interruption when the pizzas arrived. Actually, we'll probably do the pizzas after the talk this time. I reckon. Go on, I'll do that.
Okay.
I'll just hold my shit.
Oh, that your group. So you intend
Alrighty. So first of all, thank you very much for coming here. We've been running these meetups, Lucas and myself. Lucas even longer than me. Lucas runs the Bitcoin meetups for over 2 years, and Lucas will say a bit more about his history. But yeah, and then so thanks for coming here. But then also thanks to ThoughtWorks for providing this space. For almost 2 years, they've actually been just literally providing free beer, pizza, and this space. And not really asking much in return except for a bit of good karma. So they're a good company. My experience of ThoughtWorks is that they're a programming company, or that they just literally want to code for social good. That's my experience of them. And so if you're looking to get development done, then you need to go and speak to ThoughtWorks. So that's my little plug for ThoughtWorks. I'm Tom Miller. I'm just very passionate about Ethereum. That's my main overall style, and it's not just Ethereum; it's other blockchain technologies as well. I really have fallen in love with this peer-to-peer dream, where we can start to respect one another, not because of hierarchical status, but because we are all peers in this equal society. So that's the most exciting thing for me, and Ethereum is currently the most promising technology that can make that possible. And there's lots of other exciting technologies as well, but Ethereum have had at least 2 or 3 years of community development, and so are way ahead of the curve. So that's why I sort of still lead with Ethereum first. Tonight's agenda: we'll talk about the price, we'll talk about the fork that's coming up. I'm just going to give you a little brief 5-minute 101 on what blockchain is. Can I just get a show of hands? Who understands what blockchain is? All right, cool. That's good. Who's a programmer in the space? All right, that's even better. There's lots of you. And we'll talk about next meetup, and then basically we got Lucas, which Lucas understands this technology from the core, like literally from the mathematical functions that make this all possible. So a big issue that I have is people talk about the price, but it's not really the price that's important in this space. It's the market cap that's the most important thing. So this is a screenshot that I took of today, and we're thinking about this in terms of American dollars at the moment. But Bitcoin's worth 78 billion US dollars right now. Ethereum's worth 28 billion US dollars, and then you can see Ripple and Bitcoin Cash. So they're the top 4 or 5 currencies. So if you're really going to think about this in a holistic way, and I'm not here to give investing advice at all, but I just want people to want to point out that don't think about it as the price. Think about it as, well, what's bigger, what's smaller. For Litecoin to double, it only needs to get injected another $2.6 billion. For Ethereum to double, if $2.6 billion went into Ethereum, it wouldn't really be much of a dent, maybe 4 or 5%. So, and same with Bitcoin, like 2%. So if you're going to get into that space, don't think about the price. Think about the total number of tokens and how much money needs to be injected for the price to double or something like that. So that's just an important thing to think about, I think, when you start thinking about investing wise in these tokens. In 5 days' time, we're actually going to go through a fork, and this was actually basically meant to be when Ethereum first launched in 2000. The idea was sort of first thought about in 2013, And there was, on the white paper, they sort of like put out these different stages that they were going to go through. Frontier, I skip Olympic because most people I started really interfacing with the network on the Frontier. That's when the network kind of went really live. This was more test. And then we went to Homestead, which is what we're currently in right now. And I really remember this date because 14th of March is my birthday. So I felt like they organised it around my birthday. I'm not sure if it was in my dream or something, but I feel like they consulted with me and said, yeah, Tom, do we need it on your birthday? Yeah, we need it on your birthday. So I was like, yeah, okay, we can have it on your birthday. But no, that wasn't really the case. But then they pointed out that we'll do Metropolis after this, and there wasn't really a date for this. But the issue is the big difference between Homestead and Metropolis is in the white paper it was going to go to proof of stake. In fact, it wasn't even in the white paper. It was decided a little bit later that they were going to go to proof of stake, from my memory. And proof of stake, I'm not going to go into it right now, but basically it means that you don't need to be mining so much or have all this hash power to be able to be invested in the network. It means that you're kind of putting something at stake. In fact, it's ether at stake to be invested in the network. But the thing that what we realize in the community is that, hang on, we can't just all of a sudden switch off mining. Like there's millions of people, no, not millions, maybe like 10,000 people that have invested a lot of money into hardware to compete in this mining consensus algorithm. And so they decided to split up Metropolis into the Byzantine upgrade and then the Constantinople upgrade. And so it's kind of like an easing way of, the way I see it at the moment is that it's an easing way of moving away from proof of work to proof of stake. And then Serenity is when everything's meant to be, life is meant to be utopian, which probably won't happen, but we'll see what happens.
Just on that, so we all get what forks mean?
Yeah, does everyone understand what a fork is? Then put up your hand if you understand what a fork is. Alright, so not everyone understands. You give your example of a fork.
Well, I guess it's think of it maybe as a version update on the system. Some are backwards compatible, some aren't. So it's really a big change into the protocol. So
yeah, it's like there's a piece of code that people run, and then there's another version of the code with a small change. That's my understanding of a fork, and so it's just like which one do you want to go down? So that's why they call it a fork.
And is Casper's coming in Constantinople? Is it Constantinople?
I haven't looked into it. Not sure. Who knows? Does anyone know?
Casper, isn't that the dream?
Hey, how you going, mate?
Yeah, I think they're using Casper for verification and getting the mining for blockchain.
This is Daryl Morris, by the way. He's a moderator on the Ethereum forum, so he knows what's going on. All right, so these are the upgrades in this. So basically, we're kind of splitting up Metropolis now into these two upgrades, and in the next upgrade happening in 5 days, where are we going here? Basically, we're adding in, if you understand what opcodes, 4 new Ethereum opcodes, 4 sort of native contracts that we've been constantly using over and over again, and why don't we just make them more applicable? And then this is the part that refers to the mining adjustment. So they're changing the difficulty on the mining. And then intermediate state removal. I haven't personally gone deep into. I have to understand them myself properly, but this is what they stated that they're going to move, that they're doing on this upgrade.
Could be a good topic for the next meetup.
It could actually. That's probably, we should research it. If anyone wants to spend the time researching it and presenting, that would be great. Because
do you know if Byzantium is a done deal? In other words, are all miners going to go with it? Because
I think it's going with people.
Because everyone, by sheer vision, everyone's going with it.
I think they've decided that's why they've split it up, so that the community doesn't split up, basically. Because otherwise it would have caused too much. Even though that these, 4 upgrades.
There's nothing controversial.
Yeah, so it's not too controversial. That's the idea of splitting this Metropolis up into 2 upgrades. So we don't know when the Constantinople is going to happen, but just probably when everyone gets a consensus and think, yeah, okay, now's the next stage. Yeah, so I reckon that should be a really good topic for the next meetup. We'd like to give a quick sort of like 101 on what blockchain is. This is like according to Wikipedia, the history of blockchain. I have a different perception on the history of blockchain, but basically it starts with cryptography in 1991, and that's when we first described these blocks. And moving all the way into, we had Bitcoin in 2008, and then this idea of Bitcoin 2.0 or blockchain 2.0, where you could have a programmable logic put into the system, all the way up until Harvard Business. They decide, oh yeah, we recognize blockchain. So good on them, and the World Economic Forum government.
Sorry to interrupt. Does someone have this white card? Or are they still downstairs?
I think they're still downstairs. No, it wasn't Simon anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, they're still downstairs.
This one.
I go to.
Oh, actually. Sorry, I've got it.
Oh, you
I forgot.
Thank you.
Tom, I had a question about the fork. So is that the difference between hard fork and soft fork? Does it split the coin or?
Yeah,
here's
so-
zero. Yeah.
So hard forks are generally not backwards compatible. Soft forks are. So a hard fork is kind of an all-in proposition, whereas soft fork, like I said, is backwards compatible.
So is this a hard fork?
These would be hard forks, yeah.
But it only creates a new coin if the other miners, if there's a
They
split
don't
in the
agree.
miners. As far as I'm aware, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
So there's going to be an upgrade of the client so basically just when you need to upgrade a piece of software on your computer, they're downloading a new client with that implements those 4 new protocols, and it's up to them. It's their personal decision if they want to upgrade their software or not. And that's why it's kind of like a soft upgrade, so that people don't we want people to just move fully to the new network, so we don't end up with a new Ethereum, another spin-off of Ethereum. But there's nothing stopping people just taking Ethereum, copying it, and doing the same thing anyway. This is I'm just going to touch on this just for the people who are sort of not technical. Basically, the big problem in the world is that we've got 7 billion people on the planet. We've got governments that don't trust one another, we've got corporations that don't trust one another, we've got people that don't trust one another, we've got government departments in the same government that don't trust one another. And how do we sort of like have a common sort of like consensus platform where we can all sort of like agree on what happened? And this is in fact, I heard this from Eru first, that blockchain's kind of like yelling out in a crowd, and everybody recording the information and sort of like verifying, yes, Tom did yell out in the crowd and this is what he said, so we all can agree on the event that happened. So it's about our brain sort of recording what happened, and then relaying it to other people and finding consensus about really what happened. And that's what we're doing with computers. So this really sums it up. So Bob and Jane sign a contract together. It could be a legal contract, could be anything. There's people that are witnessing that contract, and we all sort of communicate backwards and forwards, peer-to-peer, about what happened on that contract. And I call this sort of like peer witnessed contract. It's kind of happens in a community environment. Our brains sort of actually agree that this is what happened. Like right now, we're all in agreement that Tom's speaking right now, or we're all in agreement that I'm wearing a pink thing. We're all in agreement that Hayden's wearing a pink thing and he's got a beard between his legs. But that's what happens. Like
Oh, look.
Let's all look at
let's all look at between his legs. We're all in agreement that pillow is pink. Yeah. So, and that's how you sort of like we mitigate. If I'm being bad right now, then you sort of like say, well, hang on, no, we're not in agreement that you can be bad right now. So you understand this community consensus, and this has happened. This is the way the protocols of our brain work right now. So from a non-technical person, this is a really easy way to understand what blockchain is doing. So that's people doing it. Now just replace those people with computers, and we're doing the same thing. Only thing is also computers are the medium in this contract. So just how the smartphones are medium between it all. And this is how we're going to achieve ongoing sort of community consensus, or computer-aided community consensus across 7 billion, 8 billion, 9 billion, in the future. That's the vision. That's one. That's kind of the problem that we're solving, and it's kind of being solved in quite a nice way. So I'm not going to go through the rest of these slides, but it provides a trust framework so that we can create that community consensus across those 7 billion people. So no one's excluded, no one's left out, and we actually can sort of call it mining. We actually, the best ideas sort of rise to the top instead of getting crushed before we can all sort of start to review them. There's lots of reasons for all this. Why blockchain? Blockchain means totally different things to different people. Reduce costs, increase revenue, reduce risk. It can mean, what does the internet mean for you? But yeah, it has huge social and political implications as well. And yeah, we don't really know where it's going to take us, but ultimately, I think it's going to be a fairer world. And we can and this is the reason why myself, and I could speak for Lucas as well, we run these, is because when the internet came around, it was up to us to decide how we want to, create this internet. And it's kind of up to us, and this is why I raise awareness of how we want to create this internet and how we want to create this new blockchain infrastructure. The difference between, Ethereum and other types of blockchains, Bitcoin is kind of like a calculator. No offense, Lucas. Lucas runs Bitcoin meetups as well.
I love my calculator.
We had to start with something.
Windows Phone's dead too, so it's bad image there, mate.
That's of yesterday.
Ripple came along in 2012, and it became a Swiss Army knife, like a better calculator. And then we had sort of programmable functions with Ethereum in 2014. There's a timeline here. You've all heard of Vitalik, and we're up to, just past the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, which is about 150 Fortune 500 companies in America who have agreed that they want to invest more money into developing the protocol to work for their businesses so that they can make things more smooth. And here's the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. So there's a lot of companies involved. Smart contracts, and this ties in a lot into what we're going to be talking about tonight. If smart contracts are going to be acting on information, we need to make sure that information is actually true and a true source or a trusted source. And that's what oracles are. This is kind of probably what's going to happen. I mean, this slide I think was created maybe over a year ago, and it's kind of pretty on the ball, I think. We started with cryptocurrencies, payment, remittance. We're now moving, it's 2017, we're just starting into identity. I know we're definitely moving into electronic health records as well. And then beyond, we're going to get right into decentralized autonomous organizations. So, next meetups we've got on the 25th of October at River City Labs, thanks to Caleb who's organizing that. And then we're also going to have the blockchain Christmas party in conjunction with the Bitcoin meetup on the 17th of December, and the event or location is still being decided. If you want to find out more information, all you got to do, I had a lot of fun creating this slide, you got to Google Ethereum Brisbane Meetup, and it's that easy, and you'll find out what to do next. So I want to really hand the mic over to Lucas Cullen. Lucas has kind of been a bit of a mentor to me in this space as well, so he's got a lot of vision. He's surprising in everything he says. He's just got deep knowledge of the technology. I consider myself, I've got fairly deep knowledge, compared to other people, but he just takes it to the next level. And that's it. Whoops. That's it. Thank you very much, Lucas.
All right, cool.
Carry on.
Oh, great intro. All right.
I put some slides together which covered a little bit of what you just said, so we can go through them.
There. Move into the slide. Alright, so one thing Tom didn't mention is we are all volunteers, even Simon helping at the door, Hayden, etc. So thanks to these guys helping out. If everyone wants to help out, it's everyone gets a benefit from them. We don't get paid to do this. So Eru, I think, snuck in.
Thanks, Eru.
Again for his stuff. So always looking for volunteers and help. I think community news. I think we just kind of went through that. Unless anyone else got any announcements they want to, any startups or things people have done they want to shout out? No. All right. Well, next up.
Oh, actually, I don't.
Yeah, go. This is about the community, not about us. So yeah, come on, please. Introduce yourself. It's about everyone here. So
No ICOs? Maybe ICOs? Okay.
My name's Paul. I'm just working on a project. It's called the BRA project. I'm a real estate agent. A lot of my clients have had problems in the past with the transaction in real estate, whether it's agents' fees, time it takes. We're working on a way to be able to stream that using the blockchain. So stay tuned. Thank you.
I know you've shot out a few emails, Paul, so maybe we'll announce it on the side or something, or if you got some press release. But or if you want to do a night talk about your product, whatever, it's just you know where to find us. So
Cheers, Lucas.
that's right. Looks like it's about everyone. Tom mentioned the next meetup. So we actually got the Elixir rooftop where we've had a few of the Bitcoin ones. It's only a capacity of 65. We've already exceeded that, so we might look at changing that venue soon. So Tom and I will work out the next couple of weeks where that'll be. So tonight, as mentioned, oracles. So
Look, it's just like a Christmas party. Will it be
good point. Yeah.
dollars up front type? Well, surely it can't be free.
Well, Bitcoin's at $6,000, so normally we get sponsors. So Elixir have got a 2K minimum spend. So I think we might have $1,000 up sponsorship, and we'll probably can get another 1,000. Otherwise, we might just charge a $5, kind of filter out people who are really keen anyway, put that on the bar. But we're looking at what kind of venue, because we might try and up it to about 150 capacity, because we've already pretty full, and yeah, we do this fun. So, but yeah, watch the space. Yeah, good questions. Now, something else on that. Christmas party is always fun. Oracle. So, as mentioned, I guess tonight was about how do we get information from the real world into the blockchain world. So we kind of see this narrative get thrown around a lot. So someone says, I want to create a smart contract when a courier delivers a parcel, funds are released, they escrow to a merchant, or something maybe more of like if Alice bets Bob that Ethereum hits $500 or greater, the first, then yeah, they win a wager. So a bit of a misnomer. So this is my design drawing skills as an engineer. So up the top, that was my real world. That was kind of be like the world, and down here is our blockchain world. And this guy here is supposed to be some smart contract. So in the Bitcoin, in the blockchain world, sorry, it's kind of this sandbox where it can't actually talk to the physical world and vice versa. So what the thinking is we have this guy here that's this segue between the real world and the physical world, and we call this guy an oracle. So what happens is a smart contract, the blue guy, can actually reference another smart contract and get data from it. So when you sign up to this smart contract in the event of this wager, we both agree, or both parties agree, that that contract address will be the source of truth. And I'll go into in a second how we can verify that. So then in this contract here, we can reference that contract address there, that's immutable. And then we have some kind of job or some kind of API that pushes data from the real world into that on some kind of cadence. So that's what we're going to try and code up tonight, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So proving that that oracle is yours, well, I guess one of the ways to do it is we can then, this is where you, in your ICOs, this kind of same kind of thing. How do you prove that that contract is really yours? And a lot of the ways we do it, we just put that contract address behind some kind of SSL or some kind of traditional website. There has been attacks on that, domain spoofing, etc., to then try and change that URL. There's the ETH, what is it, the ETH swarm thing, to the ETH DNS to again try and add evidence. So that's basically how we can try and marry the traditional technologies with the blockchain.
So would that be something like, say you wanted to just increase your token in line with the amount of people in the world, let's just say that. Would there be an oracle that you could create that, say, goes through what you think is always going to be a reputable source, say CIA site, not that everyone would like to CIA.
Yeah.
But anyway,
World,
something like
World
that.
Health or something. Yeah.
And then it goes and pulls at whatever increment that however many people in the world, and then you reference that to say, well, this year it's now this, so we're going to grow.
Yeah.
By whatever.
Yeah. Whatever feed you're going to come in. And one of the slides I was going to add is, I believe that, you know, when we look at the model like Google, where information is kind of king, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that say, oh, I've actually got more intellectual property than I realise. I might have car sales data where I can then become an Oracle or TAB for horse racing and all these other data points and start oracleizing this data and being that trusted segue into it. I guess the caveat is writing to the blockchain costs money, and how do you monetize this thing if you're putting a lot of data in there? So I guess tonight I just put the agenda on GitHub, and I've got source code on GitHub. And one of the things I guess Tom didn't mention is this was the biggest RSVP tonight too, so I guess the group's growing. But yeah, tonight I want to just show some code, but full disclaimer, the last 3 days have probably been the worst days of my life. And then last night, when I thought that was gone, my wife was in bed throwing up. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, I said, see honey, she's still in bed, look after the kids, I'm going to meet up. So, husband and father of the year. But hey, you guys first. So, there's some of this stuff here I didn't get through. We've got a few developers, we've got some guns over there, so if I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected. So let's all learn together. So tonight, we're going to develop a smart contract in Visual Studio Code, which runs on all platforms, including Linux, Mac, Windows. Truffle, I got stuck on this, it wasn't deploying, so I'm going to skip that guy. I didn't have time to debug. For no other reason, I just chose Python as that script between the real world and the blockchain world. So a lot of, I guess, servers can run like on lightweight Ubuntu servers, a Linux server, and Linux natively has Python in it, so you can just set up some kind of timer job or a cron job where you can just ping the Oracle and update the contract. So I just chose Python for that. And I saw there's a lot of .NET guys and Azure guys on the Meetup group, so I thought I'll make a .NET Core app as well, which runs on all platforms now, to do a bit of unit testing and to deploy the smart contract as well, given that Truffle's not working for me. Yeah, so let's, alright, so we'll get into it. Alright, so the goal was is that effectively? Okay, the goal was to make a AUD to Ethereum Oracle. So we're going to have this price feed. So in that event of say Alice and Bob betting, where do they get that real information from? So I found a data source that provides that from an exchange that provides that evidence or that data feed. So we're going to make it a smart contract that takes in that data. Then we're going to write the Python script to hit that guy. We're going to deploy it, hit that guy, and then have another contract that interfaces it. So again, bear with me because coding on the fly. So set the version. I'm going to call this guy.
I just want to say, for those of you who are not programmers, it's really good just to see what a programmer does. So just sort of like see what happens, you know, and just sort of sit there and just go through the experience, I reckon.
Yeah, so we'll do it live and we'll kind of learn as we go.
I might add to that, because being able to understand the smart contract and Solidity code itself, a good smart contract should be human readable by a non-programmer. And if a non-programmer can read it, then you're halfway there. So,
yeah.
So what you're doing is just Solidity is programming you.
Yeah, so feel free if I make a mistake, because like I said, my head's really not in the right space right now, but we'll we'll progress. So what I'm doing there is creating the contract, just call it contract AUD Oracle. And we have those braces, left and right braces, that's the squiggly guys here. So then we're going to have a function which instantiates the contract. Now one of the problems is, given that this is on the blockchain and anyone can hit this guy, do we want anyone to hit this guy? So what we're going to do here is have an address, the type address, which is an Ethereum address, and we're going to call that guy owner. Now when we deploy this guy, when we instantiate this function through the constructor, call this guy a constructor, we're going to set the owner to message.sender, right? So what I'm doing there is saying, when this contract gets deployed, this function will get called. I'm associating that variable there, which I call owner, with the address of it. So only the person whoever deploys that contract can then update, as we'll see in a minute. So we're just going to have another value, we'll call it here, we're going to have another type, basically uint, and we'll call it public, so it's accessible by the world, and we'll call it value. Right, so this is where it's going to actually store the price, so say $500, and I guess one thing to note, we don't have decimals, so we'll actually store it as something like that. Okay. Then what we're going to have here is a function. Price, and we're going to pass in say value. Then we're going to do here is we're going to store that new guy with the underscore to the contract one. Pretty simple stuff, right? So that's basically it. So we might put up another property up here, something like some kind of marker of when this thing got called. And then down here we can say okay, so what basically I'm saying there is that each time that function new price gets called, I'm going to push that now, which is the Ethereum clock, into this variable timestamp which lives up here. And as Daryl mentioned, it is important if we're taking the position that code is the law and we're going to read smart contracts, then it makes sense that we understand what's going on here. So when we read an ICO contract or something, we can kind of understand what's happening. Now, as mentioned, the astute people in the audience will say, well, anyone can hit this guy here, right? So Alice could actually inject in fake data and say, hey, Ethereum is whatever arbitrary figure you like, I win the bet. So kind of negating the whole idea of an oracle. So what we can have here is this idea of require. So the contract itself will enforce some kind of condition, and we're going to call that condition owner, message.sender must equal owner. So at the top we set the owner to the guy who starts the contract. And if we go back to my slide about say that address on my domain, you assume I've sent this through him. Then when here, if only the person who calls this or executes this function, this guy here will throw it if not, right? So that's how we can then kind of add some kind of security or authentication into it. Cool. Alright, so then in Visual Studio Code, we just do our command palette compile contracts, and if we're all good, it compiles successfully. Now what happens in Visual Studio Code, we come up here to this bin guy for binaries, and we have in here what we call the ABI file and the bin file. So the bin file is the byte of the opcodes, which Tom mentioned before. We're actually adding some new opcodes into the Ethereum chain. And here, the ABI file is a JSON contract definition. So we'll note that we have here the values that we said and their types. So this is where something like your Web3 client is something you can actually then say what are the interfaces of the smart contract. Okay, so that's that first piece done. So what I'm going to do now is create a .NET Core guy that's going to deploy this thing. So in .NET Core, so to create if you haven't used .NET Core before, it's Microsoft's .NET language that now runs on all platforms. So you can, if you install the SDK, you can just go .NET new and then XUnit as the type. And I think that will break because I'm already in there, but I'll just make a new folder. So that'll just create a new project type, and if I go to my README, there's two other libraries that I need to add. This guy here. So I like to show it because then it's like, well, there's no kind of smoke and mirrors. If we can do it here tonight, you can probably go home and follow this README and get something up and running. So we go back to our terminal, put that guy in. So what an Ethereum is a client wrapper that wraps all the .NET Core codes to the JSON RPC calls to interface with the smart contract through a guest node. I think it probably works on Parity too. So what this does now is that it downloads that package for us and puts it into that project, and then we can just do .NET restore. It should have restored already, and then away we go. We should be up and running. But here's one I prepared earlier. So I've got here this guy, which is my helper class. So I've got in here a few hard-coded addresses, which are the actors. So this guy here is the owner, and these are two Alice and Bob. And then all I'm going to do here is I have my Oracle name, which I mentioned, a few helper functions like Unix time. We all know Unix time. So the Ethereum network works on Unix time. So when we say Alice and Bob bet, we actually have to say something like this guy here. So if I want to do that wage at 2018 epoch time, I use a converter here, or that helpful function will do it for me. Okay. So again, what I mentioned is when you're making contracts and people are writing this timestamp in here, one way to game it would be like, you're actually looking for this and saying, hang on, did you do GMT time, etc. So for delegating all this responsibility to the Ethereum network, as humans we actually have to understand what that contract is actually doing. If we're, because the idea is we don't have lawyers to interpret that intent, we're using the code, so it's, as mentioned, it's probably important to learn that. So we'll make a note of that guy. That's a good thing. That was my one I prepared earlier. That's another thing I missed is we can actually have an event to what do I call it? Updated. So the idea is an event is when something happens, you can have things subscribe to it. So instead of asking like the Ethereum network each time, polling, has this thing been updated, has this thing been updated, so forth, we can actually raise an event where subscribers will then say, hey, this price is updated, update your UI if using a responsive language or JavaScript language. And then what we do down here is we just call that event guy and we pass through the new value. Okay, so when we run through these lines of code, we hit this guy, anyone who subscribes to that event will say, hey, it's updated, and get that value. So whereabouts were we? Right, back to helper price. So then within Ethereum code, within Ethereum, we need to read the ABI file. So that's all this guy here is doing, is reading this ABI file off disk for me. Also get the bytes, this guy here off disk for me. And that's just another way of doing it. And then I've got another helper function here which deploys the contract. So I set the contract path, just see on disk your contract name. Then what I do is I get the bytes off disk. I set an arbitrary gas figure of 200,000. Then I get the ABI file. If I'm not using testnet, I will unlock my account. If I've got parameters in there, that's in a constructor, you can actually pass through parameters as well, so you might want to inject a date or something into the contract. But I'm just saying here, if there's no parameters, just run it. Normally, I send the request to deploy the contract, and then if it's on the Ethereum network, you might have to actually monitor that contract to see if it gets deployed. So what this guy does here, we pass through the transaction hash, he gets the receipt back and he just sits there and polls, have you been deployed, etc. When it is deployed, and once this loop breaks, we then come back and we tell me the contract address and the height. Now because this is going to be on testnet, each time we deploy the contract, we're actually going to get the same address back. So I can set that contract guy there, owner. If I use this testnet RPC here and deploy the contract, then I'll get the same contract address back. So that's alright. So we're just probably going to get ready to deploy contract. So we've all used test RPC before. Yeah. Okay, so if you don't want to deploy to the real Ethereum net or the test net, or the Roachton testnet, you can actually deploy a mock service which will act how a Geth node will work. So it doesn't cost you gas, you can hit it, and it doesn't have to have any mining CPU, so it'll throw back the address instantly. So it's just a way, when you're doing your testing, you just hit your test RPC guy and have that just like a mock service. So you can, when you set it up, you can give it defaults, or you can, each time you do it, it'll give you some new addresses. So if you pass through a contract private key, this private key here is for this guy here. It just then makes that, if you actually explicitly set the private keys, then it makes your testing a little bit easier because you not have to change that owner and stuff. And then here, if you want to send Ethereum, you can just give it an arbitrary balance in we. So I think that's probably something like 1,000 Ethereum. So all I'm doing there is just setting that guy up, and then if we just copy that guy into a terminal, and I think it's just npm install something like that. I think it's something like that. Probably should have done that. Yeah. What? Here I prepared another one. And I created a script here, a bash script to do that, so hopefully this guy works. Valid private key length. If I just do that guy here, what's going on?
Running in another tab.
That's probably it, yeah. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so. So there we go. So when I pass through that guy, a private key, then I get that account up there for you, and he's listening on that port there. So if we go back to our .NET code, in my helper class, remember that's the owner, he matches up, we can see that OX23, and I just pass through localhost there. So hopefully, like I said, maybe after tonight you can go through this code, and hopefully it's enough to get up and start playing with something. So with all that said, if I leave that open and I go back to here, I'll deploy via my .NET Core. And then I just do .NET test. Actually, sorry, I should show you the actual test methods. Apologies. So then here I've got this one here. In my unit test, I use this XUnit framework. When I instantiate the unit test class, I deploy the contract, and then I'm going to run some tests over it. So when I do it, I'm going to call that new price function, and I should get back 0 because there is no data. Then I should pass through the next guy. I'll call it again. I'll set some parameters with a price in there. That's probably where I got up to last night before I call it quits. So then I can actually run this guy here, pass through if I wanted to on new price. I can set it to 1, and then I can set it to say 500 or 5,000, 50,000 like I mentioned. So we'll call it in cents. Pass that one through, send the transaction, it'll get mined, and then I should really call the other guy, assert that the contract has updated, but I didn't get time to do all that. So if we go back to our .NET guy, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. And we should see some activity on here, deploying through, and all our tests run. So because it's a new blockchain, so we actually start from block 1, we'll always get the same, and we're always sending it from that guy, we should always get the same contract address back. So that's handy for when we want to then call the contract. So recap, written the contract, the Oracle contract, use a .NET framework just to deploy. Like I said, you could use Truffle, but it wasn't working, so I just went back to this guy. If you want to write some unit tests, you can on this to make sure your contract's behaving correctly. So we've now deployed, say, a Oracle contract to the internet. Now, like I mentioned, I wrote this in Python just because it runs on Linux. So Python's a good little scripting language, in my opinion, just to do stuff. So with Python, you use this package manager called pip. So we install the JSON RPC client, and there's actually a consensus Ethereum client to do it. And we do our import statements. Then I found this guy here that does a price feed. So if we look at him, again, this could be any API. So the idea is this little Python script goes off, calls a thing, gets that data, and it's going to push it back in. So these just come back as JSON. So we have an object here, result, and then in that object we have a property of price with that data here. So when we look at our Python script, what we're going to do here is we just do that request.get. I'm going to print out the response there so we can look at it. And then we're going to get that data. We're going to get the key of result, pass it into result, then get the key of price, pass it into price variable, and then we're going to echo that back out, print as price. Now, with this Python RPC client, we just take in the node address, which is localhost. The contract address, which I mentioned, is because it's block 0, is always the same with that guy, so we can see those matched up for me. Then going to use that RPC client to my node to the port. I'm going to ping it, just call it block height, so I know that my node's responding, and print that back out to the screen. then again pass through my contract address again to call it. Then I'm going to make that call with transaction, and then pass through to that method new price with that price guy there, and then we're going to print that guy off. Now this was all running on Linux last night, but then when I did it before on the way in, I noticed there was a dependency on my Mac, so it's not going to work, but we'll get halfway there. So we can just go. So I just put it in this folder here called scripts. I don't know how to get out of that guy. Okay, so that's that guy there, update Python. So to run Python, you just go Python and then him. So if we remember back, he's going to do a few things. He's going to get the data from that guy. He's just going to print out that JSON object, parse the JSON object, get the price, print it out like that guy, then push it through. So let's see if he works. So call the API. Downloads them as that JSON. We can see we parsed it correctly, and then this is where I've got some dependency that I've missed, some crypto type library. So unfortunately my script's not going to work, otherwise this guy would have lit up and we inject that price through. So like I said, I was working on Linux, but on the Mac I wasn't, so we'll debug that another time. So does that all make sense so far? Everyone? Well, hopefully we've got, like I said, hopefully this is from my README. There's enough to go through and start playing around with it, and you'll run into troubles, and that's the fun part. So
that's what programming's like, though. It's never perfect. It's just you're constantly trying to learn something new.
Yeah. So I like to. Yeah, so learn by doing. So hopefully there's enough here, enough languages where you can go off and be dangerous and learn a few of these things. So I'll update this README as we go along. So the last little bit is how do we call, so our last little contract, what are we doing for time? A bit over time, but we'll just go last thing on the fly. So we can create another contract here, and this can be our bet. Okay, so Pragma, what are you at? That's just your version. Contract bet. So this is our Alice and Bob wager. Set up races. And then what can we have here? So we could have, I'm just thinking on the fly here, we could have under okay, then we can have something like function and we can have say function under. So what we can do here is we could build a smart contract to escrow that wager. So we have a guy, if you want to bet on over 500, send money to this one. If we mark the contract as payable, you can actually send Ether to it, and this guy could be under, and we won't worry about evens for now. So the idea is we could have something like, we're going to store the address, there's problems with this, but we're going to store the address of the sender in under or over. So here we could just go, So anytime someone sends something to that, we send it there, and then wrong way. Copy that guy. So that's some way you could see who's bet on which side, notwithstanding the amount. You could have something like some kind of value to say, you know, so then you could somehow map that back to see how much they did. And then we could have here, say, our function to pay out. We won't make it ownable because anyone, we want to make this thing irrespective of bookies, so anyone can hit this guy and pay out the contract. So we require, our bet was over that time, so now it's greater than whatever that guy was. Do we have it up here? Just take it for now, for example.
Okay. What is that object, MSG, that you're using there?
Message. It's just message.sender. So you look up the other properties on a message.sender and message.value to you want to be looking at. So what we see is there is
There's actually information in the transaction as it's
yeah. So all I'm saying here is so no one can call this function until after our bet date, and then then this is where the rubber hits the road. How do we assert where it's true enough? So this is what we call our oracle. So the other thing we need to do is we import the other guy. And this is just to get that ABI file definition. If you're doing it from a third party oracle, it's a little bit trickier, but given that this is just a basic. Okay, so all I'm saying here is in this Solidity code, I can actually reference another thing. So like in CSS and other languages like that, you know, you can actually reference other classes in .NET, reference other classes. So that's all I'm doing there. So now that I'm referencing that and have the definition, I could say, call the guy here, my type, AD oracle equals AD oracle, and then what we do is we pass through the contract address, and as I said, that won't change when we do this deploy. If you use test RPC and at home do it again because it's block 0, use my same keys, you'll always get that guy back, and I can just pass it through like that, and it'll probably complain that I have to do something like that. Okay, so now what I'm doing is creating a new object. Well, I know the type because I've got that my Solidity guy. I'm referencing the other public key of that other contract address. As I mentioned, that can be behind SSL, so we assume this when you read your betting contract, you get this guy. This can't be changed. We go back to there, and away we go. So then we can just do our conditional logic. We can call the guy. We call it oracle.value. And then program a condition. So if our wager was basically that, greater than, then you know, whatever payout overs. So the Ethereum contract itself will hold all the Ethereum in it, and then this function here we can say, hey, proportional to your bets, etc. We could iterate through that. They're just they're just an array. So you go for I equals, etc. Iterate through that guy, pay them back their Ethereum, and you've just created a bookie without a bookie. So it could be AFL results, etc. Whatever. Market hits, surprise, whatever you want to bet on. Whatever conditions you want. So back to our courier example, it could be we get our FedEx, we have a consignment number, passes into the contract. If consignment is late by a day, get paid back some Ethereum. If the contract state gets changed to delivered, pay the merchant, etc. All those types of terms and conditions. But For the exercise, that's probably that's probably it. So I think we've covered most of it. So how to write a simple contract, deploy, run some unit tests, hit it with a language like Python, and have another contract, call another contract, and away you go. So too rusty. Sorry?
I don't see anything in there that actually checks if the Oracle is updated.
Yeah, so that's the one. So you can have that. Yeah, and we put in timestamp. It looks like that. It's greater than. So yeah, up here when we did that, we could set the timestamp to now. Something like that. So yeah, you can do that. But yeah, so again, this is the fun. I'm trying to break contracts. So trying to game the contract. So yeah. So anyway, I'll check that all to GitHub. I'll put the link up there if you want to use it to start playing around with them stuff, and hopefully get a little bit better understanding of when people say how terms and conditions actually have to go through an Oracle, things actually have to go through it, things actually have to update it, and there are people like Brave New Coin, providing oracles as a service.
Well, do they do a USD?
Sorry?
Do they do a USD?
Yeah, but they stopped. When I was looking, when I was preparing this a couple of weeks ago, they, I actually had to use an Oracle, and I didn't want to write my own, so I was going to use these guys, and I noticed they stopped. And again, it's because these things cost gas to run, so there's actually a cost of providing Oracle as a service. So
are they providing providing it for free for now? Or?
Yeah, but how do you monetize this thing if it's once you're right in, it's for there to consume. So
in the future, contracts will be able to run their own code, like with their own gas, so that would be less of a problem. So anyone can sort of just come along and fund the contract itself, and then you have something like Ethereum alarm clock or something like that will just sort of trigger every so often, and you can just automatically pick up these contracts on. That's a while away though.
Yeah. So like I said, they're trying to socialize their address here, so you can review that guy, review it into your betting contract or whatever, and then they give you the ABI file, etc. So that's their struct there. Similar kind of thing. And they did have somewhere showing and I was doing it there. I think, yeah. See, so they stopped a while back. They were doing it every day for whatever it is, and they stopped back in August, so a couple of months ago now. And then there's these guys here called Oracle Eyes, which are trying to do this as more of a service, so provide a platform and build this stuff around. Yeah, I haven't used these guys too much. I've just read the elevator pitch. So.
The trouble I have with them is trying to get a USD exchange rate, but it gives you it's actually storing the JSON object as a string, so
can that? Yeah, there we go. But writing itself isn't fun, so yeah, write itself. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and I guess the last slide, probably one of the most important. Where to go after this? So platform bar is a normal venue just down the road, so I'm sure everyone wants to come down there. Thanks again, and like I said, anyone wants to talk about the things, or do meetup nights, and figure it out.
Thanks, guys. So our food arrived a little bit late. That's all good though. So we can all enjoy food first, and then if you want to, we can go down to the platform bar after this and have another drink. So
cool.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming along. Thanks.